The infertile alien queen was discarded, but a human treated her like a treasure. The alien queen had once ruled a mighty empire that stretched across countless star systems. Her people had admired her wisdom, her courage, and most of all, her ability to bring forth new life that could strengthen their civilization. But now she was alone, abandoned. The grand halls she had once walked with pride were gone. The voices of her loyal advisors and devoted citizens had faded into silence. She lay on a barren planet, her regal form stretched across the cold, rocky ground, staring at the dim sun that barely warmed her alien skin. She remembered the day they discovered she could not produce offspring. At first, she had hoped it was a mistake, perhaps a minor illness or a temporary condition, but the verdict was final. She was infertile. In her culture, that was unforgivable. The ability to bear children was not just personal, it was sacred. It ensured the survival of the species, the continuity of the empire, and the honor of the royal line. Now, stripped of that role, she had become a burden. Her council, once respectful and deferential, had turned cold and distant. One by one, they had whispered about her inadequacy. She had been sent away, not with the honor due to her rank, but with shame and silence. The queen lifted herself slowly, her limbs stiff from the long journey that had brought her here. She had drifted through space for days, carried by an old transport ship that had been more concerned with convenience than comfort. The stars passed by her window like mocking lights, reminding her of the empire she had lost. She had expected sorrow, perhaps even anger, but what filled her most was a quiet emptiness. She had ruled for decades, and yet now she felt as though she had no purpose. The wind of the barren planet whispered across her face, and she wondered if anything remained in the universe that could still recognize her worth. It was then that she saw movement. A small ship descended through the pale clouds, kicking up dust as it landed not far from where she rested. The queen squinted, wary. Most beings who saw her would not see a queen at all. They would see only a fragile, useless creature, discarded and alone. She prepared herself, ready to defend, flee, or hide, though she had not moved from this spot in days. The hatch opened, and a human emerged. He was small, barely half the height of her, and he carried no weapons that could harm her. But what struck her most was not his size or appearance, but the light in his eyes. He was curious, cautious, but not afraid, not at first. He moved slowly, scanning the landscape, and then finally he looked at her. "Are you alive?" the human asked, his voice soft, almost hesitant. The queen stared at him. She had been abandoned by her people, left to survive alone, and yet this small, fragile being spoke to her as if her presence mattered. She did not answer. Trust had been stolen from her long ago. Instead, she observed him, studying his every movement. There was no malice in him, no desire to dominate or control. "I didn't think anyone would be here," the human continued. "It's strange finding someone here. Are you hurt?" The queen considered ignoring him, but something in his tone made her pause. He did not demand, he did not judge, and he did not flee in fear. Instead, he spoke with curiosity and kindness. For the first time in what felt like centuries, someone treated her as more than an object, more than a failure. "I am fine," she said at last, her voice resonant and controlled, though tinged with exhaustion. Her language was harsh, alien, but he listened patiently, nodding as if he understood. He stepped closer, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "I'm Elias," he said. "I come from a planet called Earth. I didn't expect to find anyone here, especially someone like you." The queen lifted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. There was a hint of pride in her posture, though tempered by weariness. She had once ruled entire worlds. Now she had to gauge whether this human was friend or foe. "I am the queen," she said simply. "But that is meaningless here. I have been abandoned." Elias tilted his head. "I don't care about what others think. I see you. That's what matters." The queen studied him, unsure if she had ever been spoken to in such a way. No one had seen her worth when it mattered most. No one had treated her as if her presence was valuable. A strange warmth began to rise in her chest, one she had not felt in decades. He offered her water, carefully handing her a small container. She hesitated but drank. She did not know why, but it was comforting, a gesture she had not expected. She was used to being treated as fragile, useless, or dangerous. This human treated her with respect, almost reverence. As they sat together, Elias asked about her life, her culture, and her people. He listened attentively, never interrupting, never judging, never assuming that what he thought was more important than what she had experienced. The queen spoke slowly, sharing stories of her empire, the challenges she had faced, and the weight of responsibility she had carried. When she spoke of her infertility, her voice carried the heavy sorrow of betrayal. "I was abandoned because I could not give life," she said. "That is all they saw in me, not my knowledge, not my wisdom, not my courage, only what I could not produce." Elias listened, nodding with quiet understanding. "I think that's a terrible way to measure worth," he said softly. "Life isn't only about what we can create or what others want from us. It's about who we are, the choices we make, and how we treat others. You have done great things already, and that matters. You still matter." The queen felt something she had not expected: hope. Not hope that her empire would accept her again, not hope that she would return to her former life, but hope that perhaps she could still find meaning, even far from the people who had discarded her. Over the next days, Elias helped her explore the planet. It was barren, but not lifeless. Strange plants with thick, silvery leaves grew near underground water streams, and the soil was rich with minerals that glinted in the sunlight. The queen, despite her initial reluctance, found herself teaching Elias about alien flora, the properties of the minerals, and even the history of her people. In turn, Elias showed her tools and technology from Earth that fascinated her. She began to see that knowledge and understanding were just as valuable as power or reproduction. One afternoon, as they rested near a cliff overlooking the planet's orange horizon, Elias turned to her. "You know," he said, "most people would never give a second glance to a queen who has lost her throne or status. But I see you. You are not worthless. You are treasure, not because of what you can do for me, but because of who you are." The queen stared at him, feeling a mixture of disbelief and relief. No one had ever said such words to her. It was not flattery or manipulation. It was sincerity. For the first time, she realized that perhaps her life could continue in ways she had never imagined. She did not need an empire to define her worth. She did not need to produce offspring to be valuable. What mattered was who she was, the wisdom she carried, and the choices she made. Night fell, and the sky turned a deep violet, dotted with unfamiliar stars. The queen lay back on the rocky ground, her thoughts heavy yet lighter than before. She had been discarded, yes, but in the midst of her loneliness, she had found someone who saw her as a treasure, someone who valued her existence. Elias set up a small camp nearby, and she watched him move about, fascinated by his resourcefulness and care. Humans were small, fragile, and yet brave in their own ways. He did not have the strength of her former guards, nor the wisdom of her council, but he had something even more rare: kindness and respect. As she drifted into a deep rest, the queen realized that her journey was not over. Being abandoned by her people had hurt, but it had also led her to someone who reminded her of her own value. Perhaps being discarded was not the end, but the beginning of something new. She could survive. She could thrive. She could even find joy again. For the first time in many years, the alien queen slept without fear. She was alone, yes, but she was not forgotten. A human had treated her like a treasure, and in that small act, she had rediscovered a truth that her empire had long forgotten: that every life had value, and even the discarded could shine brighter than the stars. The days that followed were quiet but full of promise. Together, the queen and Elias explored the rocky plains, cataloged plants, and discovered hidden caves filled with crystals that glowed faintly in the dark. Each discovery strengthened her sense of purpose. Each conversation with Elias reminded her that intelligence, courage, and compassion could never be taken away, no matter what others believed. Though her heart still ached for the empire she had lost, she began to see that her story was not over. A new chapter had begun, one in which she could be valued for herself, where trust and friendship mattered more than status or power. And for the first time in decades, she smiled, knowing that even in exile she had found a reason to live, to learn, and to be seen. The days on the barren planet passed slowly, but the alien queen no longer felt the crushing weight of loneliness. The human, Elias, stayed nearby, helping her explore the rocky plains and the strange life that clung stubbornly to the planet. He did not ask her to rule, to fight, or to produce anything. He simply treated her as an equal, listening to her, learning from her, and respecting her every word. At first, the queen had been cautious. She had seen countless beings who approached her expecting something: obedience, knowledge, power, or status. But Elias asked only questions out of curiosity. He wanted to understand her, not to use her. He was fascinated by her stories of ancient empires, by the strategies she had devised, by the responsibilities she had carried. Listening to him ask questions, she realized that he saw her as more than a failed ruler. He saw her as a person, someone worthy of respect. Elias showed her tools from Earth, small devices that could measure air quality, devices that could store water, even simple lights that ran on energy stored in small batteries. He explained how humans used ingenuity and observation to survive in harsh environments, even when they were smaller and weaker than other creatures. The queen was intrigued. Her empire had relied on strength, numbers, and rigid hierarchies, but this human survived with curiosity, patience, and clever thinking. One morning, as the violet light of the planet's sun began to rise, Elias set up a small camp near a cave. The queen watched him from a distance, studying his movements. He moved carefully, aware of the loose rocks and sharp edges, yet he seemed confident. "Why are you here?" she asked, curiosity slipping into her voice. "I explore," he said simply. "I look for life, for knowledge, for new experiences. I didn't expect to find a queen in exile, but now that I have, I want to learn from you. I want to understand what made you great and what made you human, or alien, I should say." The queen's lips curved into a faint smile. "Humans, you are not like my people. You are smaller, weaker, and fragile, and yet you survive, you adapt, you learn. There is something strong in you that my people would not understand." Elias chuckled softly. "Strength isn't always measured by size or power. Sometimes it is measured by the choices we make, by how we treat others, and how we keep moving forward." For hours, they walked together, examining strange plants and minerals. The queen pointed out plants with thick silver leaves, explaining how they stored water for long periods, and minerals that could conduct heat and energy. Elias recorded notes and sketches, fascinated by her explanations. Each shared observation built a bridge of understanding between them. "You are wise," Elias said at one point. "Not because of your rank, not because of your title, but because you have lived, learned, and observed. That is something no one can take from you." The queen felt warmth in her chest. No one in her empire had ever spoken to her like this. They had seen only what she could produce, what she could give them. Elias saw her mind, her experience, her courage. For the first time in decades, she felt seen. As they explored further, they came across a series of cliffs that overlooked a vast canyon. The wind whipped around them, carrying the faint scent of minerals and distant water. Elias paused, looking over the edge. "Incredible," he said. "This planet may seem barren, but it has life, beauty, and mystery, just like you perhaps." The queen studied him. "Do humans often see worth in what others discard?" she asked. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but not always. Most look for what is useful, what is profitable, what can be measured. But a few see value in what others overlook. I see you." For a long time, the queen remained silent. She had been discarded, abandoned by the empire that had once worshipped her. She had believed that her value was gone forever. And yet, here was a being who treated her like a treasure, who appreciated her not for what she could produce, but for who she was. That evening, as they settled in the camp, strange lights flickered across the horizon. The queen rose, curious and cautious. Elias followed, watching as her senses picked up subtle shifts in the air and the faint vibrations in the ground. "What is it?" he asked. "The planet speaks," she said. "Even in its silence it tells stories. There is life here that adapts, survives, and waits. These lights, they are natural, and yet they are a signal. I do not know of what, but it is a sign of the planet's resilience." Elias nodded, impressed. "You understand things that I could never see alone. Your experience, your knowledge, it is incredible. I am lucky to learn from you." As the nights passed, they discovered caves filled with glowing crystals, hidden pools of water, and minerals that shimmered under the twin moons. Each discovery reminded the queen that life was not only about empires or status. It was about survival, curiosity, and connection. Elias' admiration was not superficial. He respected her mind, her courage, and her ability to find meaning even in exile. One evening, as they rested near a pool of water reflecting the stars, the queen spoke quietly. "I have been discarded, Elias. My people do not see my worth because I could not give them what they wanted. They left me here to die alone, and yet I feel different now. You make me feel seen, even when I have no claim to power." Elias smiled gently. "You do not need their approval. Your worth is not measured by what they demanded of you. You are more than titles, more than traditions, more than expectations." You are alive, you are wise, and you are capable. That is enough. The queen felt a stirring of hope she had not known in years. Perhaps life could continue in ways she had never imagined. She could learn, teach, explore, and survive. Perhaps she could even find joy, even though the empire that had defined her life was gone. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew stronger. They shared meals, stories, and discoveries. Elias marveled at her intelligence and insight, and she began to trust him in ways she had never trusted anyone since her exile. She realized that friendship, respect, and shared curiosity could create a new kind of strength, one that did not rely on power or reproduction, but on mutual understanding and care. One afternoon, as they climbed a rocky ridge, Elias asked, "Do you ever regret being a queen?" The queen paused, looking over the jagged horizon. "I do not regret my past," she said slowly. "I regret that I allowed others to define my worth. I regret that I believed their judgments, but I do not regret my life. It has taught me, shaped me, and now it brings me here to a new beginning." Elias nodded, understanding. "And I am glad it brought you here. I have learned more from you in a few weeks than I could in a lifetime of reading or studying. You see the world in ways I never imagined." The queen felt a smile spread across her face. She had been abandoned, yes, but she had found someone who recognized her value. In this strange, lonely place, she had discovered something more important than power. She had discovered trust, respect, and friendship. One morning, they encountered a strange plant that seemed to glow faintly under the sun. The queen examined it carefully, noting its unique properties and the way it drew water from deep underground. "This plant survives because it adapts," she explained. "It does not fight the environment, it works with it. There is a lesson in that for all beings, human or alien." Elias watched her carefully, fascinated. "You are teaching me as much as the planet is. I see now why your empire valued you so highly. You do not just survive, you understand life, strategy, and balance. That is something rare, something precious." The queen felt a surge of pride and gratitude. For the first time in decades, she believed that her life could matter, not because of what others demanded, but because of who she truly was. She had been discarded, yes, but she was not broken. She had been seen by someone who valued her mind, her heart, and her courage. And that recognition gave her strength. Night fell once more, and the stars spread across the sky like diamonds. The queen lay on the rocky ground, Elias nearby, and for the first time she felt a sense of peace. She was still far from her empire, still far from the life she had once known. But she had found something perhaps more important, a human who treated her like a treasure, who saw her worth when others had abandoned her. As she drifted into sleep, she knew that life on this planet, with Elias by her side, could be a new beginning. She could explore, learn, and grow. She could find meaning and purpose without the judgments of her past. She was an alien queen, yes, but now she was also something more, a survivor, a teacher, and a friend. The barren planet no longer felt empty. It was alive with potential, discovery, and hope. And in the company of a human who valued her unconditionally, the alien queen realized that she had not been discarded after all. She had been given a chance to start anew, to reclaim her sense of self, and to shine in ways her empire could never have imagined. The alien queen and Elias had settled into a routine on the barren planet. Each day brought new discoveries, strange plants, glowing minerals, and hidden caves filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered. The queen had begun to feel a sense of purpose again, a quiet pride in teaching Elias about her world and learning from his human perspective. For the first time in decades, she felt alive in a way she had not thought possible. One morning, while exploring a valley rich with silver-leaved plants, the queen paused. Her senses, always alert, detected something unusual in the distance. The wind carried a faint vibration, a rhythm in the ground that did not belong to the natural pulse of the planet. She knelt down, placing her hands on the rocky soil, closing her eyes to better sense the movement. Elias, noticing her concentration, approached quietly. "What is it?" he asked softly. The queen opened her eyes slowly. "Something is coming, not natural, not native to this planet. I do not know what it is yet, but it is deliberate." Elias furrowed his brow. "Do you mean someone?" "Yes," she said. "Beings with purpose, intelligence, and likely strength. We must be cautious." Despite her warning, the queen felt a strange surge of anticipation. She had spent years abandoned, feeling powerless and discarded. Yet now, with Elias by her side, she felt prepared to face the unknown. Her mind raced with strategies, possibilities, and ways to protect herself and the human who had shown her such respect and kindness. They decided to move toward higher ground, a ridge overlooking the valley. From there, they could observe the approaching figures without being immediately seen. Hours passed, and finally they saw them. Several alien ships descending slowly from the sky, their forms sleek, menacing, and familiar. The Queen's heart tightened. These ships belonged to her people's rivals, factions who had always viewed her empire as a prize to be won, and her as a tool to manipulate. "They are not here for trade or curiosity," she said grimly. "They seek advantage, power, or control. Perhaps they know of my exile. Perhaps they intend to capture me." Elias studied the ships, noting the sleek designs and strange technology. "Can they hurt us?" he asked cautiously. "They could," the Queen admitted, "but we are not defenseless. We must use our minds, our surroundings, and our strategy. Physical strength alone will not save us." The Queen led Elias down the ridge, guiding him through a network of narrow caves and rocky passages that she had discovered earlier. She explained the properties of the rocks, how certain formations could conceal them from sensors, and how the glowing crystals might be used to signal or distract intruders. Elias listened attentively, amazed at her knowledge and her ability to adapt. As they prepared for the arrival of the alien forces, Elias spoke. "You are incredible. I have never seen anyone so calm and intelligent in the face of danger." The Queen smiled faintly, though her eyes remained serious. "I have faced danger before. I have commanded fleets and made choices that determined the lives of millions. But this is different. I am not queen here. I am alone with a human who trusts me. We must protect each other, and we must do it wisely." By mid-afternoon, the first of the alien ships landed near the valley. Small scouts emerged, their forms tall, armored, and armed with strange devices. The Queen watched them closely, noting their movements, their formations, and their weaknesses. She whispered instructions to Elias, who followed her guidance without hesitation. "Move to the left," she said. "The rocks there will conceal us. Wait for my signal." They crouched behind the jagged stones, observing as the scouts spread out. The Queen's mind raced. She could not call her empire for help. They had discarded her. She could not rely on brute strength alone. Her advantage lay in intelligence, strategy, and the trust she had built with Elias. Hours passed as they watched the scouts explore the valley. The Queen whispered, pointing out patterns and openings, showing Elias how to move quietly, how to use the environment to their advantage. Together, they began to set small traps, loose rocks that could fall to block paths, reflections from crystals to confuse sensors, and carefully placed shadows to hide their presence. Elias worked quickly, impressed by the Queen's foresight. "I never imagined survival could be so strategic," he said. "It's not just about fighting, it's about understanding, adapting, and predicting." The Queen nodded. "That is true power. Not dominance, not numbers, but the ability to see more than the enemy, to use knowledge and insight as weapons." As the scouts moved closer, one of them detected movement. Elias froze, but the Queen remained calm. She whispered instructions, guiding him to a small crevice that concealed them completely. The scout passed by, unaware of their presence, and the tension eased slightly. Hours later, the main alien forces arrived. They were larger, more numerous, and heavily armed. Yet the Queen did not panic. She studied their formation and identified weak points, areas where the terrain could slow them down, where natural barriers could protect them, and where the glowing crystals could disorient their sensors. "Elias," she said, "we cannot fight them head-on. We must use the planet, our knowledge, and your ingenuity. Are you ready?" "I am," he replied firmly. "I trust you." That trust strengthened the Queen's resolve. Together, they executed their plan. They lured the alien forces into narrow passes, using loose rocks and natural barriers to slow their advance. Crystals reflected sunlight into the enemy's sensors, creating confusion and hesitation. Elias followed her instructions perfectly, moving quickly, quietly, and intelligently. The Queen felt a surge of pride and hope. Despite being discarded, she was not powerless. Her mind, her strategy, and her bond with Elias gave them an advantage that brute strength alone could never achieve. She realized that her value had never been in her ability to produce offspring, but in her intelligence, courage, and ability to adapt. As the alien forces grew frustrated, the Queen led Elias to a higher vantage point. From there, they could see the entire valley and anticipate the movements of their enemies. She whispered instructions, and together they directed the alien scouts into traps and ambushes. The invaders were clever, but the Queen was cleverer. Each step they took brought them closer to defeat without a single life being harmed. Hours passed, and the alien forces began to retreat. They had underestimated the intelligence and resourcefulness of a discarded queen and a small human. The Queen watched them leave, her chest swelling with a mix of relief and pride. She turned to Elias, who was smiling with admiration. "You did it," he said. "We did it." I could not have imagined a better teacher or leader. The Queen smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction she had not known in years. "We survived because we trusted each other, because we used knowledge instead of force, and because we adapted. That is the strength of life, human or alien." As night fell, the valley returned to quiet. The stars reflected in the pools of water, the glowing crystals shimmered softly, and the Queen felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced danger, tested her abilities, and discovered that even in exile she could lead, protect, and thrive. Elias sat beside her, looking at the glowing horizon. "I have learned so much from you," he said. "You are not just a queen, you are wise, brave, and inspiring. I am honored to know you." The Queen felt a warmth in her heart. She had been discarded, abandoned by those who once called her ruler. Yet here, in the company of a human who valued her mind, her courage, and her spirit, she realized that she had not been truly abandoned. She had been given an opportunity to rediscover herself, to prove her worth in new ways, and to find meaning beyond the expectations of her empire. For the first time in decades, she felt truly alive. She was not just surviving, she was thriving. She was not just a discarded queen. She was a teacher, a strategist, and a friend. And with Elias by her side, she knew that her journey had only just begun. Over the following days, the Queen and Elias explored the valley more thoroughly. They discovered hidden caves with glowing fungi, streams with fresh water, and minerals that could be used for energy or signaling. Each discovery reminded the Queen that life always had surprises, even in the most barren places. Each moment with Elias reminded her that connection and trust could be more powerful than armies or titles. One afternoon, while examining a cave filled with luminescent crystals, the Queen spoke quietly. "I have learned something important," she said. "Life is not about what others demand from you. It is about understanding, adapting, and making choices. It is about seeing value in yourself and in others, even when the world has discarded it." Elias nodded. "And you have shown me that more than I could have imagined. You are more than your past, more than what others expected. You are extraordinary." The Queen felt a quiet pride. She had faced her first challenge since exile and had emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and more confident. She had survived the alien forces, protected Elias, and proved that her worth was not measured by what others demanded, but by her intelligence, courage, and compassion. As night fell once more, the Queen looked at the stars, feeling a sense of hope she had not known in years. She had been discarded, yes, but she had found purpose, friendship, and strength. And in the company of Elias, she realized that her journey was far from over. New challenges would come, new discoveries would await, and new opportunities to shine would appear. The alien queen, once abandoned and considered useless, had reclaimed her sense of self. She had proven that true power lies not in status or production, but in intelligence, courage, and the ability to trust and be trusted. And with Elias by her side, she knew that they could face whatever the universe had in store together. The alien queen had grown stronger and more confident since Elias had arrived. She had rediscovered her sense of purpose, learned to trust again, and realized that her worth was never defined by the expectations of others. Yet, the quiet peace of the barren planet was about to be tested. Rumors of her presence had spread across nearby systems. Word of the discarded queen surviving alone reached factions that saw her as either a prize or a threat. They did not know her as she truly was, but they recognized her influence, her intelligence, and the danger she could pose if left unchecked. One morning, the air shifted with an unfamiliar tension. The sky darkened with the shadows of ships descending from above. These were not the small scouts they had seen before. These were the main forces, numerous and heavily armed, intent on capturing her. The Queen felt a sharp edge of alertness in her chest. She turned to Elias, who was already assessing the ships with his human ingenuity. "They have come in force," she said. "They will not leave without taking what they seek. We must be ready." Elias nodded. "Then we prepare. We won't fight blindly. We use what we know, what the planet gives us, and what we've learned together. The queen led him to the network of caves they had discovered earlier, which now served as both shelter and strategic positions. She knew the terrain intimately, the hidden passages, the rocky ridges, and the glowing crystals that could distract or confuse sensors. "We have an advantage here," she explained. "These forces are strong, but they are not clever. We must use strategy, patience, and observation to protect ourselves." Hours passed as the alien ships landed and troops began to deploy. The queen observed their movements carefully, noting patterns, weaknesses, and the best routes for defense. She assigned positions to Elias, guiding him to points where he could maximize his impact without unnecessary risk. Though he was smaller and physically weaker than the alien soldiers, his human adaptability and resourcefulness made him invaluable. "Do not fear them," she said quietly. "Fear clouds judgment. Trust your senses, trust the environment, and trust me." Elias nodded, his eyes steady. "I trust you completely." The alien forces advanced, but the queen had already prepared. Loose rocks were positioned to block pathways, reflections from crystals were set to disorient sensors, and natural barriers were reinforced with careful precision. She moved silently, guiding Elias and ensuring that every step they took gave them the best chance of survival. The first clash was subtle. Alien scouts moved into a narrow pass, expecting an easy path. Instead, rocks tumbled silently behind them, blocking escape routes. Crystals reflected the sunlight into their sensors, causing confusion. The queen's strategy relied not on brute force, but on clever manipulation of the environment. She whispered instructions to Elias, who executed each maneuver perfectly. "Now," she said, pointing to a narrow crevice. Elias moved into position, and together they redirected the scouts into a trap, a deep, natural pit concealed by rocky terrain. The scouts struggled, their sensors unable to detect the fall until it was too late. The queen watched calmly, though her mind raced with anticipation. She had led armies before, but this was different. Here, she relied not on her title or her former power, but on intellect, strategy, and the partnership she had forged with a human. Every decision mattered. Every choice had consequences. And yet she felt confident because she had learned to adapt, to think ahead, and to trust in her own abilities. As the alien forces regrouped, larger troops moved into position. The queen guided Elias to a higher vantage point where they could observe the enemy's formation. "See their patterns," she said. "Notice the gaps, the hesitation, the predictable steps. We do not need to attack directly, we need to outthink them." Elias nodded, taking careful notes. "I see it. Their strength is in numbers, but their strategy is rigid. If we exploit their rigidity, we can protect ourselves without direct confrontation." The queen smiled faintly. "Exactly. Intelligence and observation can be more powerful than brute force." The battle continued throughout the day. The queen used the terrain masterfully, directing alien forces into traps and natural barriers. Elias assisted, using his human ingenuity to create diversions, signal movements, and maximize the advantage of their positions. The alien troops were strong and well-trained, but they underestimated the queen's mind and the unexpected tactics of a small human working alongside her. Hours passed, and the alien forces began to tire. Their attacks were scattered, their coordination faltering. The queen saw the moment to act decisively. She signaled to Elias, and together they executed a final strategy, a careful collapse of a narrow canyon passage that blocked the alien troops and forced them to retreat. The plan required precision, timing, and absolute trust in each other. When the dust settled, the valley was quiet once more. The alien forces had retreated, unable to overcome the queen's strategy and the clever adaptations of Elias. They had expected an easy victory, but instead they found themselves outmaneuvered by a discarded queen and a human who valued her as more than a title or a tool. The queen exhaled deeply, a mixture of relief and pride washing over her. "We did it," she said softly. "Not through force, but through wisdom, patience, and careful observation. We protected ourselves without unnecessary harm, and we proved that strength is more than physical power." Elias looked at her, admiration shining in his eyes. "You are incredible. I have never seen anyone think so clearly under pressure. You are more than a queen. You are brilliant, brave, and inspiring. I am honored to stand with you." The queen felt a warmth in her chest. She had been abandoned, betrayed, and considered useless. Yet here she was, victorious not through domination, but through intellect and partnership. She realized that her value had never been in her ability to produce offspring or maintain an empire. Her worth lay in her mind, her courage, and her ability to inspire loyalty and trust in others, even those from an entirely different species. Over the next few days, they reinforced their positions, studied the terrain for further threats, and explored hidden caves for supplies and shelter. The queen taught Elias advanced tactics, not for violence, but for protection, strategy, and survival. She explained how to observe patterns, anticipate moves, and adapt to unexpected situations. Elias listened eagerly, absorbing every lesson, while the queen felt a renewed sense of purpose in passing on her knowledge. One evening, as they rested near a crystal pool reflecting the stars, the queen spoke quietly. "I have learned much in my life," she said. "I have ruled, commanded, and protected many. But I have never known a bond like this, one built not on fear or obligation, but on trust, respect, and understanding. That is more powerful than any empire I have known." Elias smiled. "I feel the same. You've taught me so much about life, strategy, and courage. And you've shown me that true strength comes from knowing yourself, valuing others, and working together." The queen considered his words. She had spent so long being judged by others, defined by what she could or could not do. Now she realized that those judgments no longer mattered. She had reclaimed her sense of self, proven her abilities, and discovered a new purpose that was entirely her own. Days later, while exploring a series of hidden caves, they discovered ancient markings, symbols etched into stone, remnants of a long-lost civilization. The queen studied them carefully, interpreting the meaning through her knowledge of alien languages and patterns. Elias watched in awe, fascinated by her insight. "These symbols tell a story," the queen explained. "A story of resilience, adaptation, and survival. Life always finds a way, even in the harshest conditions. That is the lesson we must remember, human or alien." Elias nodded, understanding. "And we have proven that together. We adapted, we survived, and we thrived despite the odds. That is remarkable." The queen felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had faced one of the greatest challenges since her exile and emerged victorious. She had protected herself and Elias, defended the valley, and shown that her mind and courage were worth more than any title or expectation. She realized that this was not just a victory over the alien forces, but a personal triumph over doubt, fear, and the judgments of those who had abandoned her. As night fell, the valley shimmered under the light of the stars and the glowing crystals. The queen lay beside Elias, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had been discarded, yes, but she had found meaning, purpose, and companionship. She had rediscovered her strength, not through power, but through intellect, trust, and courage. The queen understood now that the future held many possibilities. The alien forces might return, new challenges might arise, but she was ready. With Elias by her side, she could face whatever the universe sent her way. Together, they were more than a queen and a human. They were a team, a partnership built on respect, intelligence, and shared courage. For the first time in decades, the alien queen felt truly alive. She had reclaimed her identity, proven her worth, and found a bond that no empire could take from her. And as she gazed at the stars, she knew that the journey was far from over. New adventures awaited, new discoveries beckoned, and new challenges would test them, but she was no longer afraid. She had been discarded, yes, but she had become something far greater. A survivor, a strategist, a teacher, and a friend. And with Elias by her side, she knew that together, they could face the future with courage, wisdom, and hope. The alien queen and Elias had survived the attack and secured their place on the barren planet. The alien forces had retreated, unable to overcome the clever tactics, careful planning, and teamwork that the queen and the human had executed. But victory did not mean the queen could return to her empire, nor did it erase the years she had spent discarded and alone. Instead, it opened a new chapter in her life, one where her worth was not defined by others, but by her own choices and abilities. The queen moved among the glowing crystals of the valley, examining the patterns of light and shadow. Elias followed her closely, carrying tools and supplies they would need for the next phase of their lives. "We should consider what comes next," Elias said. "We've defended ourselves, but we can't stay in hiding forever. There must be more to life than survival alone." The queen nodded thoughtfully. "You are right. Survival is only the beginning. We have knowledge, strategy, and the opportunity to create something meaningful here. The question is what form that will take. For days, they explored the planet together, mapping out areas rich in resources, studying plants, minerals, and water sources. They discovered caves with unique formations, hidden springs, and valleys filled with flora that glowed faintly at night. Each discovery reminded the Queen that the universe held endless possibilities for those willing to observe, adapt, and explore. Elias worked alongside her, building simple tools, setting up safe shelters, and using his human ingenuity to make life easier and safer. He learned from the Queen's wisdom, while she learned from his perspective small but clever solutions that complemented her strategic thinking. Together, they formed a partnership built on respect, trust, and shared purpose. One afternoon, while examining a series of caves that opened onto a wide plateau, the Queen spoke quietly. "I have spent decades serving an empire that valued only certain qualities in me. They judged me by fertility, by tradition, by expectations. And yet I have discovered that my value has always been intrinsic in my mind, my courage, and the choices I make. This planet, this life, and you have shown me that." Elias looked at her, admiration in his eyes. "You are more than anyone ever realized. And now you have the chance to shape a new legacy, one that is entirely your own." The Queen smiled faintly. "A legacy, yes, but one that must be built carefully, not with fear or force, but with knowledge, respect, and example." Over the following weeks, they began to transform their corner of the planet into a base of exploration and learning. They used the natural resources to construct shelters, signal devices, and small energy systems powered by the glowing minerals. The Queen taught Elias advanced strategies for observation, problem-solving, and understanding alien ecosystems. In turn, Elias showed her human ways of improvisation, creativity, and adaptation that complemented her more disciplined approaches. Together, they explored new regions, documenting flora and fauna, and cataloging minerals and water sources. The Queen shared stories of her empire, lessons learned from leadership and diplomacy, and insights into survival and strategy. Elias absorbed everything eagerly, asking questions, suggesting ideas, and contributing his own knowledge of Earth and human technology. One day, while surveying a valley filled with luminescent plants, they discovered a small alien species that had adapted remarkably to the harsh conditions. The creatures were intelligent, cooperative, and capable of problem-solving. The Queen observed them carefully, noting patterns in their behavior and their use of natural resources. Elias marveled at her insight. "You understand them without needing to speak their language," he said. "Your mind is extraordinary." The Queen smiled. Observation, patience, and respect reveal much more than force ever could. Life communicates in ways we must learn to see. As the months passed, their partnership deepened. The Queen realized that she had found more than survival. She had found companionship, respect, and a sense of purpose. Elia's admiration was genuine and consistent, not for her title, her past, or her power, but for her mind, her courage, and the way she approached life. She had been discarded by her people, but here she was treasured for who she truly was. One evening, as twin moons rose over the horizon, casting silver light across the valley, the Queen spoke. "We have learned much from this planet and from each other. But the universe is vast. There are civilizations, knowledge, and challenges that await. I do not wish to remain in isolation forever." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "Then we explore together. We can visit new worlds, share knowledge, and build alliances based on respect and understanding, not fear or power." The Queen felt a thrill she had not experienced in decades. Adventure, discovery, and purpose, these were gifts that no empire could have provided. She realized that she did not need her former throne or titles to make a difference. She could forge her own path, guided by intellect, courage, and the bond she shared with Elias. Their first journey beyond the planet was cautious. They used Elias' ship, repaired and adapted with the Queen's guidance, to navigate nearby star systems. Along the way, they encountered other civilizations, small colonies of aliens who had heard whispers of the Queen surviving exile. Many approached with caution, but the Queen's diplomacy, combined with Elias' human honesty and openness, quickly turned skepticism into curiosity and respect. In each encounter, the Queen demonstrated wisdom and strategy. She shared knowledge about ecosystems, survival, and diplomacy. Elias contributed human insight and technological solutions. Together, they became a team admired for their courage, intelligence, and integrity. The discarded queen was no longer just a survivor. She was a mentor, a guide, and a symbol of resilience. Word of their journey spread. Stories of the queen who had been discarded and the human who valued her like a treasure inspired other beings across the galaxy. Many who had been overlooked, abandoned, or underestimated began to see their own worth. The queen realized that her exile had given her perspective and empathy she would not have gained otherwise. She could now use her experiences to help others, to teach, and to build bridges across civilizations. One day, while exploring a lush, hidden planet, they encountered a species that had once been in conflict with her empire. Elias suggested caution, but the queen approached openly, speaking with honesty and respect. Through dialogue and shared observation, they discovered common ground. The aliens admired her intelligence, courage, and willingness to understand rather than dominate. Through patience and diplomacy, she turned former enemies into allies. Elias looked at her with pride. "You have changed the universe in ways no throne could have. You inspire, you teach, and you lead without force." The queen reflected on her journey. She had been abandoned because she could not fulfill the expectations of her people. She had been considered worthless, discarded, and alone. Yet through adversity, she had discovered her true worth, not in titles, power, or fertility, but in intelligence, courage, empathy, and the ability to inspire others. As they set up camp on the new planet, the queen spoke softly. "I have learned that true value is not what others see or demand. It is in who we are, what we choose, and the ways we help and respect others. That is a legacy worth leaving." Elias nodded. "And you are leaving that legacy every day. Not because of your past, but because of who you are now and how you choose to act." The queen felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had been discarded, yes, but she had become far more than she could have imagined. She was a teacher, a leader, a guide, and a symbol of resilience. With Elias, she had built a partnership based on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Together, they had explored, survived, and inspired others. Over time, they visited multiple planets, helping civilizations in need, teaching knowledge, and demonstrating the power of intelligence, courage, and collaboration. The queen's reputation grew not through fear or authority, but through respect, wisdom, and her ability to see value where others overlooked it. One evening, on a planet filled with glowing forests and crystal rivers, the queen and Elias watched the sunset. Elias turned to her and said, "Do you ever miss your empire?" The queen considered the question. "I miss parts of it, the challenge, the responsibility, the opportunities to lead. But I do not miss the judgment, the abandonment, or the narrow definition of worth. What I have now is more meaningful. I choose my purpose. I choose to value myself and others. That is far greater than any empire could offer." Elias smiled. "And you've created something no empire ever could, a legacy based on respect, learning, and hope. You've shown that discarded beings can shine brighter than stars, and that humans and aliens can achieve greatness together." The queen reached for his hand, a simple gesture of trust and companionship. She had been abandoned, underestimated, and judged by her inability to meet others' expectations. Yet now, she stood as a living example that true value comes from courage, intelligence, empathy, and the choices we make. She had been treated like a treasure by someone who saw her worth, and in return, she had discovered a purpose beyond her wildest dreams. Together, they watched the stars appear, glimmering above the glowing forests. The queen knew that adventures awaited, discoveries beckoned, and challenges would arise. But she also knew that she was no longer alone, no longer discarded, and no longer defined by others' expectations. She was free to shape her own legacy, to explore, to teach, and to inspire. And so, the alien queen who had once been abandoned became a symbol across the galaxy. Not for her titles, not for her empire, not for what she could produce, but for her mind, her courage, her empathy, and her ability to see the value in herself and others. She had been discarded, yes, but she had become a treasure, a queen not of an empire, but of wisdom, hope, and inspiration. With Elias by her side, she ventured into the stars, ready for every adventure, every challenge, and every discovery the universe held. Together, they proved that being discarded did not mean being worthless, that intelligence and courage could overcome expectation, and that even in exile, one could build a legacy brighter than the stars themselves.